Hey, you awesome folks! Thanks for taking this journey of discovery with your guide, Keith Haney. You're listening to the Becoming Bridge Builders podcast, your favorite podcast for everything from racial reconciliation to education innovation, justice reform, and leading change in the 21st century. This podcast is for people who love to be challenged with difficult topics, but want practical solutions to solve these challenging issues. Becoming Bridge Builders makes change possible. Each week on the podcast, Keith invites innovative thought leaders to share how they are building bridges in their area of expertise. You will hear breakthrough ideas and concepts that are changing the world. He's featuring guests who are best-selling authors, leaders at Microsoft, entrepreneurs, leading educators, professors, lawyers, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can be the bridge to the change you are seeking.
My guest today is Brian Walch. He's a certified executive coach, writer, and speaker. As the owner of Shift Focus Coaching and Consulting, he helps organizations develop their managers and build best-in-class management class cultures. Before launching his own practice, he spent 25 years at growing national consulting firms where he worked with clients in HR, IT, finance, operations, and C-suite. As a partner, he filled diverse leadership roles in HR, business development, operations, and projection execution. He built a comprehensive employer branding and recruiting program and spearheaded employee retention and development initiatives. In addition to his business experience, he also led projects that have transformed small businesses, modernized government agencies, and improved enterprise-wide systems and processes. Today, Brian uses his experience with people and systems to develop tools and programs to empower managers to lead themselves and their teams and their organizations. We welcome Brian to the podcast. Well, Brian, it's good to have you on the podcast today. How are you doing?
Excellent, Keith. It's great to be here. Happy to join you.
So good to have you on. And we'll talk about one of my favorite topics is personal development and how we make people better. Because no matter what organization you're in, you can always help make people better, those who lead and those who they and the people that they guide. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Excellent. Yeah, me too. It's one of my favorite topics as well. So
I'm going to tap into your expertise to help us do that better.
Sounds good.
I'd like to start out with this question from my guest. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
There's a few, but from a professional perspective, I had a coworker one time as I was like overthinking a decision. He told me like, just give it a try. What can hurt? And honestly, when I did that, instead of like overthinking it, it kind of changed how people saw me and kind of changed the trajectory of my career. And then, so I kept that. I kept that of like, sometimes when you have this decision, I was just like, just try something. You can always change direction. So that was probably one of the biggest pieces of professional advice, a really simple but powerful thing.
So for someone who overthinks things, how do you shift to not do that? What's your replacement? Because you can't just do something different. So how do you replace that or change that mindset?
Yeah, one of the ways that works really well for me is to, especially when it's a big decision, is to analyze how can I make that decision smaller. So if I can, instead of moving, I don't know what a good example would be, moving across country, can I talk to people in that different part of the country and get a better idea? Like what are the small steps I can take instead of making that big decision? Sometimes you just got to make a decision. You just got to do something. And the other thing I'll do is just capture the decision moment. Because what happens is like after you make a decision and things don't turn out right, you look back and you're like, oh, that was a dumb decision, or I wish I hadn't made it. And it's having that decision moment captured. You look back and go, no, I made the best decision I could at that time. Now these are the consequences. I'm going to make the best of it. So those are a couple things I do to kind of like change my mindset instead of like getting stuck in the analysis paralysis.
I love that. Sometimes I'll give myself a deadline that I can overthink it for a certain point, but I got to make a decision by blank date.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Like, what else am I going to know? What more am I going to know that's going to change anything?
Exactly. I love that. I'm always curious about people like yourself who have achieved a certain level of success in life. Who are some people, if you think back, who served as role models or inspirations for you? Tell us something about them and kind of give them a shout out.
Yeah, the shout out would be kind of hard because honestly, like my biggest inspiration, partly it's because of this journey I'm on in terms of my own business, but my biggest inspiration was my dad. Um, he had a very successful career in engineering, and around my age, he also loved flying, and he started an aerial photography business, and went that route, and that ended in it didn't end well. It ended in a little bit of tragedy. He built a plane that didn't quite materialize into all the commercial results that he expected. And I still admired him tremendously because he had this courage to try to live out his dreams, do something he enjoyed. And then he went back to engineering and did engineering till late in his life because he loved it. He loved that work. And so I've always looked at him as, finding purpose and meaning and a sense of personal destiny in my decisions for what I do. And the reason I say it's hard is he just passed away like 8 months ago. So I've I still hold him, and I told him that all the time. I'm like, Dad, no matter what the results of your decisions were, the fact that you made those decisions, I respect and admire tremendously. I've got a kind of a family legacy of people making these kind of big, courageous decisions. His dad did the same thing, and so
Wow.
it's cool.
What a neat legacy. Sorry for your loss.
Yeah, thank you.
So tell us about your journey. I read your bio, but again, the bio only kind of gives us a snapshot, but you kind of give us the fill in the back part of your journey for us.
Certainly. I'm based here in Anchorage, Alaska. This is where I was born and raised. I actually pretty much live where I was raised, so I don't fall far from home. Um, but I've been married for almost 30 years. Be 30 years this August. I got 4 kids, and so I spent 25 years at an IT consulting firm and started out doing software development and programming. Carried technical work through most of that time. But as a growing consulting firm, I also got the opportunity to do a lot of very different roles. I ran the recruiting and HR functions for a long time. Helped out in business leadership, business development, helping manage offices. So had all these wonderful experiences. And I got to a point where I was just kind of thinking, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? And realized that really the impact I wanted to make was more with people, not projects and systems. And so coaching was kind of a natural business model, but that's also why I decided to venture out on my own. So now I do shift focus coaching and consulting, and yeah, we'll talk about focus on managers a little bit.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So why focus on managers? I mean, I know they're a critical part of the organization, but tell us what drove you to focus on managers.
Well, the number one reason was because I lived what I feel like managers go through. Like I have a lot of empathy for what the management experience is like. You get promoted and there's a lot of ambiguity, there's a lot of expectations, there's not a lot of support, there's not a lot of clarity. And I just lived that pain. And so partly I thought, well, I have some ideas of how I can help them. And then the other reason why I focus on managers is because I really want people to enjoy work. Like I think work can be rewarding and fulfilling. And like I shared the story about my dad working late into life because he loved work. I think there's something noble about that I want to help propagate. And managers have the biggest influence on how we feel about work. So if we can, if I can help managers be great at their job and love their job, they're going to do a better job. they're going to impact their employees. Their employees are going to go home happier. Their employees are going to be better parents and spouses and friends, members of their communities, and have more energy to give others. And so I really believe in my like idealized future fantasy state that managers can change the world if they help people enjoy their work. And that's where I believe the biggest impact we can make in our workplaces, and that's why I focus on them.
As you were talking, it kind of made me think about something. It seems like managers kind of tend to fall into some trap. So, what would you say is a management trap?
Um, yeah, that's good. There's a lot of them. One of them is I don't know what the word for the trap would be, but just the thinking I have to move up. You know, the managers get it, they go into management for a variety of reasons. So sometimes it's out of like I want to have a bigger impact, but sometimes it's I want to raise or I think I need to move up. And they get into management and they keep that mentality. Um, and then they just start getting frustrated because it, like I said, it gets more ambiguous in terms of how you progress and how you move forward and what the next steps are. And so I think that's a trap. Is like I want to move up, and it's almost harder for them the more they try to work at that, right? And instead of like, how do I get really good at my role? So anyway, that's one of the traps. Um, I think another trap is thinking that other people have the answers. that um, that that there's something that nobody's telling me, and that's why I'm not being successful, as opposed to looking inward.
If you were coaching a manager, what are some things you would encourage them to do to be better at what their responsibilities are? Because I think a lot of times you get, like you say, you get in that position, you're not quite sure what the next step is. What do I need to learn? What are some skills I need to master to be really good at this? What are some common? I mean, everybody's got different responsibilities. But what are some things you're kind of finding that's kind of common to most managers that they need to really develop if they're new to this position?
There's I put it in four categories, and I actually have an acronym for this I call risers. But to think about these four categories somewhat distinctly, because you're going to have strengths and weaknesses of a particular manager that's going to make some of these easier or harder, and your environment is going to dictate which of these are more important or less important. So the four categories are relationships or influence. So who are the relationships you need to cultivate? What kind of influence do you need to have to be successful? And then uh, skills and experience. So that might be communication skills, delegation skills, project management skills, negotiation skills. You could start listing it off, uh, and a lot of times when you start thinking about it that way, those are opening up for some good discussions with your boss or with your peers about what are they doing to be successful, or what does your boss think you need to do to be successful. So that's skills or experience. It might be a specific event in your company. So for like example, with our software developers, as they would move up, they couldn't move beyond a certain level if they didn't have the experience of taking a system into production, what we call a go live event. Like that was an experience. You couldn't mark it off as a skill. And so for some positions, you might have to have an experience of like running a payroll or terminating an employee or things like that. And then the third category would be results. So what results are you responsible for? And those are usually pretty good discussions, because what I find is a lot of managers don't really know what success criteria is for them. And then the last one is systems. Like what are the systems that you need to know, whether it's your internal systems, technical systems, or kind of the people process systems. And so I actually, when I work with managers, is kind of flip the script a little and say, okay, here are the risers, here are these categories. What do you think? Why don't you create a map of what your role would look like and how you can progress in your role for your environment, for your strengths and weaknesses, and have them put that together.
Do you find that most organizations make it clear what's expected of managers, or they have to go discover this? Because I'm kind of, as you described it, I'm going, that's good to know if you've been there like you have before and you know this. But if you're walking into it, where do you go to even find out that these are the things I need to be checking off my list to do? Because I'm kind of thinking that no one's giving you a roadmap or a 3-ring binder that says, here's the things you have to do. So how do you go about discovering that if you are a manager?
Yep. No, you're exactly right. That's why I developed the framework so that they have a way to discover it and a way to kind of organize it. But in most organizations, I would agree with you 100%. It is not clear. And in fact, the bosses will say like, of course it's clear. But then when you start talking about it, everybody's, talking at right angles. So there's a couple things a manager can do. Like I said, having this framework does provide then the opportunity for more in-depth conversations with your boss. So that's one place you can go. You can say, what relationships do I need to have to be successful in this role, or I want to keep progressing. So conversations with your boss, those are really great. Then I would also look across the organization to say who is really doing well, who has been here for a while, who do I have a relationship with that I could talk to more and get some peer support. Um, if somebody's courageous, I think it'd be great to be able to ask a few of your employees, what skills do you need me to do to support you better or to lead this department better? And sometimes those very vulnerable conversations can lead to a lot of really good interactions and kind of a change in the relationship. And then lastly, it's looking outside your organization, like either other people that you respect, that you follow on LinkedIn or something like that, or just reading books and kind of shaping that up a little yourself. And ideally, you're right, like the manager is kind of the trailblazer. The first one that does this is going to have to kind of create this and discover this as they move along. But if they do it well, then it becomes something that the next manager can use and improve upon, but they're not starting from ground zero.
Right, I love that. As a manager, what are some books you'd recommend that managers read? Because it's like I said, this is new to most people, and if you're trying to unpack what your role is, what are some resources they could look to grow from and develop from?
Yeah. Number one would be Russ Laraway's When They Win, You Win. He has a great book about management. And then I'm trying to blank on her name, Zhao, but she wrote The Making of a Manager. Those two would be like must reads for a new manager. Yeah, those would be the two off the top of my head that I would say, like, read them and reread them. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I was growing up, there was a very distinct difference between managers and leaders. Do you see them as kind of on the same par in today's business world, or are those still two separate things?
Yeah, I think that's an ongoing debate with people, right? How I see it is I really distinguish the term manager as a title, as something you're given to do, and it is kind of up to you to become the leader. And when I work with people, the first thing is understanding you have to be a leader of yourself. And so I think sometimes a lot of managers, and I know I certainly felt this way, they resist being called or holding on to the mantle of leadership for a whole variety of reasons. They don't want the responsibility. They've seen bad leaders in their history, and they're like, I don't want to be that type of person. And so I don't think it's you can just say somebody's a leader. They have to kind of move into it and fill the space. But my hope is that all of us, I don't think you have to be a manager. I hope all of us become leaders. We're leaders of ourselves. We're leaders of the people we can influence, leaders in our communities, leaders in our families. So I don't make a distinction, and I try to To be honest, I try to avoid like managers getting sucked into that. Am I a leader or not? Like,
Right.
you be a leader of yourself and kind of keep moving. And at some point, you will realize, wow, I have more responsibility to be a leader than I realize. Now I'm going to own that own that responsibility.
That's a good, because I know we had that. That's always an ongoing debate in the world of manager versus leader.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, I mean, I think the people that don't want to call their managers leaders are, just see them as filling a role. And I think those are the organizations that need to evolve, because managers, that's what I want to like keep evangelizing and bringing up, is managers have so much potential, so much capacity across all of our organizations to really influence things in a positive way.
So let's focus on the organization now. We talked about the kind of the thing we're trying to solve, but how can they better support their managers?
Yeah, my favorite thing, because it's like, if I could get up on my soapbox, the number one thing would be just invest in your managers. We look so often to try to figure out how can we do, just the minimum to get them the basic skills, and uh, that isn't working really well, because it just puts more tasks and more pressure on them, as opposed to really supporting them, from what my observations. And or we try to do these very generic solutions where we say we're going to dilute this money out across all the managers or all the employees, and we have a very diluted impact in terms of their proficiency and their ability. So my soapbox is really invest in your managers and people-based initiatives. When they get training or they get tools, they really need the support to apply those skills and apply those tools in ways that make sense for them. And that takes a lot of conversation. I mean, that's a lot of what I do in coaching is, all right, you want to be a better communicator. How are you going to communicate in this meeting? How are you going to work with your customers? And we talk through that. I mean, it's a very practical application of, of skills. And so that takes time, whether it's investment of time or investment of money. And it takes investment from senior staff. It takes investment from external coaches. It takes investment of training and other tools that can help them make it practical. So that's the number one thing. And what I say is invest them, empower them, promote them. And so that's how I think, or one of the biggest ways organizations can support managers. There's a bunch of other things, but
Why is it, in your opinion, do you think managers are undervalued in organizations?
well, that's a good question. I think that uh, that's complex. I think, and I'll give you one perspective. If you think about the manager that is doing really well as an individual contributor, they get moved into management, and they're taking care of a small group, and that's running well, and they get it running well. Everybody's kind of happy with that. The manager is like not sure exactly what they should be doing, so they kind of hold on to a pretty big chunk of the work. They kind of manage their team. They do that well enough that nobody externally is complaining about it, and they don't really want to disrupt things because the manager's not saying anything, so they assume they're happy. Their problems are kind of happy, and so they don't really look at them as a solution to other problems, because A, pulling them out would create some problems, and B, the status quo seems happy. So that is one of so that kind of like homeostasis creates a little bit of like, well, they're not really the source of future growth or future leadership. And I'd argue, back to what I just said, partly that's because we're not investing in them or seeing them that way. Um, but I think it does lead to a little bit of like they're undervalued. Um, the other side of it is we have managers that move into management and aren't good, either because they don't get the support or they went in there and realized it wasn't good. And we're not great about coaching them out of management or helping them find a different opportunity. And so they kind of stay in there like as good enough, but they're not really happy because they're not thriving. The organization isn't really happy, but nobody does anything about it. And that leads to a you know, a misconception that management across the board is just stuck at this one layer.
So it seems to me if you have a manager who doesn't create any problems, everybody seems relatively happy, you could get stuck there because why mess with something that's working? So if you're a manager who's doing okay work and everybody's okay with you, how do you get promoted? Because I'm sure the company's like, well, we don't want to take this guy. I mean, no one's really complaining. So why move him up the ladder? And so how do you get promoted when you're one of those guys or ladies who does a good enough job where the company is satisfied with your work, but they don't see it as a value enough to move you up to some higher position?
Yep. Yep. There's when I think about the management journey or the journey within your role, not like the steps on a career ladder, but just within your role, there's three stages. I call them three P's of progression. And so the first one is the practice stage. That's when you just get started and you're kind of figuring things out. And eventually you master what's needed there and you move into the perform stage. And that's where you're doing your job well. And that's where people kind of stay. Like that's that homeostasis where everybody's happy. But there's a third stage called the pioneer stage. And that's where people need to start exploring if they want to be promoted. And it needs to be, in my opinion, needs to be an open conversation because like you just said, what happens is a manager that has some ambition, if they're sitting in that homeostasis stage, they eventually they're fine for a while, and then eventually they kind of get bored. And because nobody's talking to them and they don't know what the opportunities are, what they do is they go look at other jobs. And then pretty soon they go like, that looks interesting, and they go and get another job, and everybody's like, what happened? Well, and then the organization just lost a really good manager and any opportunity for them to continue their career at that company. So having that discussion of what can I do to like make my mark, make something special, and the boss should be talking to the manager about where they want to go and what they might want to do, so that pioneer stage is something that's helping them on their career journey. The manager has the responsibility in it too, though, because they have to create enough space to actually do something different. And that takes a little bit of courage because they have to delegate some work and create some time and let go of some of the things that make them valuable and feel really good in order to have some space to do something different. But that to me is where the opportunities for meaningful promotions can happen.
So let's take that a little deeper. If you're an organization and you're listening to us right now, how do you create a healthy management culture?
Yeah, the I don't know if you've heard the expression. I'm sure you have, but I hear it all the time. Is we have as many cultures as we have managers, and right. And so
Right.
the managers really do shape the culture. And so when I talk about management culture, I think about the behaviors, the actions, the beliefs, the values of your managers. And so shaping that culture is giving them, or having that management culture is giving them some ownership and responsibility to do that across all managers. And they are the ones that steward it. Um, so, and then, I guess the other thing is I think of culture as you can't just dictate it, but it's also not 100% organic. Like there's a little bit of let's reflect and talk about what are our common practices, beliefs, values, and then what do we want that to be like, and how can we shape that and cultivate it. And if your managers are the ones doing that, then that will permeate through other areas, but it's got to start with the manager. So it's like a middle out development of your culture or cultivation of your culture.
I like that. So I'm curious, as you do this coaching with managers, what are you most excited about as you coach managers?
I guess a few things. One is I think that today we have so many tools and so many things that can that are available to us, information resources. And so, like my main message is take responsibility, take ownership. And because we have such a wealth of knowledge, people can do that in very personal ways and meaningful ways. And so I think that's really exciting. Like, I don't feel like I'm in danger of making a codependent relationship with people I coach, right? Because I'm trying to empower them, but there are a lot of resources out there if they can kind of take that ownership and use them for the ways that they want to use them. So that's really exciting. Um, and then I'm continually. I mean, I think this is ancient or as old as ever, but I'm continually amazed by just the power of like one-on-one relationships and connection. I mean, even doing, podcast interviews like this where I get to talk to people for, half hour or an hour. When you get to do that with people in a coaching environment where you're doing it over, 3 or 6 or 12 months, um, you just form these really deep connections, and then you help them see how they can form connections. And I think that's where the power is, where the value is, and where the reward is. Even in this age of AI and all those things, it's still going to come back to people and relationships.
I love that. I love to ask my guests this question. As you think about the impact you're having, what do you want your legacy to be?
I really want people to enjoy work. Like, if people said, I worked with Brian and I was happier at work, I enjoyed work, that would be, good epitaph. Um, and ideally, I mean, if I had my grand vision, it would be that work is the 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 cure for what ails us. And that's like we're so far opposite of that, right? Like, now work is a 4-letter word.
Right.
Um, but like, if we could find meaning and value and significance in our work, and that helped improve our emotional and our physical and our relational lives, that would be awesome. And if I could contribute to that, or somebody said I helped contribute to that, that would be awesome. Make me proud.
So I'm going to give you the platform to speak for 30 seconds to managers. What do you want to say?
I would tell them that everybody is experiencing the kind of angst and ambiguity that comes in your role, that it happens to all of us across all sectors, and it's not unique. And whenever you find yourself asking, I don't know what they want, I wish somebody would tell me what the options are, I don't know where to go, that you take that phrase as a cue to say, what do I want? What can I do? How can I move this forward? That's that idea of taking responsibility. Is managers have more power and freedom than they know. And if they step into it, I think they'll be happier. I think you will be happier and more fulfilled in your career and in your life.
That's great. And you did it in under 30 seconds. That's really good. Just really concise.
Excellent.
So, Brian, as we wrap up our conversation, what are some key takeaways and insights you want our audience and listeners to remember from our discussion today?
Well, I think, like I just said in that statement, one would be to take ownership, take responsibility for your career. That's really where I think the opportunity for more fulfillment, more satisfaction is, and it is entirely in your control. So that's independent of layoffs and pressures and all these things. We can always own ourselves and our career direction. And the second thing is, we talked a little bit about some of these different frameworks and paradigms, and I hope that might be helpful for people to kind of structure their thinking a little bit to be able to take action once they decide to take responsibility, to take action on things that are meaningful to them. So there'll be a couple insights that might be helpful to your audience.
So for the manager who says, I need Brian as my coach, how can they get a hold of you and connect with you, Brian?
Yeah, thank you. My website is shiftfocus.com. And if you go there, you can book a free management strategy call. I'd love to have a short call with you to talk a little bit about your needs and how I might be able to support you and your organization. And then down at the bottom, there's a subscription form where you can sign up for my weekly email. I call it Simple Sundays, and I just provide tips to become a great manager.
You have so many good resources. When's your book coming out with all these little gems in them, Brian?
Not sure. Maybe someday, but.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for what you do for managers and hopefully, like you said, helping people to learn to enjoy work, because it is the biggest part of our life. And hopefully it's one of the most enjoyable parts of our life, and we find a way to tap into our individual unique skills, gifts, and abilities, and to really make an impact in the companies that we get a chance to serve as those companies serve the greater good of the world. So thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you, Keith. It's a pleasure. I appreciate the platform to be able to share some of this stuff, and thank you for being a great host.
Thank you, Brian. Do you know that most entrepreneurs hit a revenue ceiling and have no idea why? They're working harder, spending more money, running more ads, but revenue stays flat. My friend Dr. Noah St. John calls this the invisible break. He's giving our listeners a free revenue ceiling audit to help you see what's really holding you back. You'll get a free 30-day membership to NoahBot, giving you access to Dr. Noah's 30 years of experience to help you reach your next level. But hurry, because there's only 50 available this month. So if you're tired of being stuck at the same revenue level and want to finally break through, get your free revenue ceiling audit at drnoahvault.com in the affiliate link that'll be listed in the show notes.